Welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're diving into a world where finance, crime, and artificial intelligence collide. We're talking about how deep learning is being used to combat money laundering.
Oh, yeah, exciting stuff.
It is. And our deep dive today is based on some really fascinating research from the University of Technology, Sydney.
Okay.
What's really striking is just the sheer scale of this problem. We're talking like huge amounts of money.
Absolutely. The UN actually estimates that money laundering could represent something like 2 to 5% of global GDP.
That is crazy. What does that even translate to in like actual dollars?
Well, you're looking at somewhere between $800 billion to $2 trillion annually.
Wow. So if we fail to stop this, we're talking about massive consequences.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, banks are facing billions of dollars in fines every year because their current systems just aren't keeping up.
Yeah. And that's because traditional anti-money laundering systems, they rely mainly on these predefined rules.
Okay.
So think of it like, if a transaction exceeds $10,000, flag it.
Right.
Makes sense. But the problem is these rules, they just can't keep pace with criminals who are constantly finding new and creative ways to, move money under the radar.
So it's like a never-ending game of whack-a-mole.
Exactly. And you know what? This actually leads to another big issue, too.
Okay. What's that?
False positives.
Ah, okay.
So up to 98% of alerts in these systems, they turn out to be totally legitimate transactions.
Oh, wow.
But banks still have to investigate each and every single one.
Right.
It's so costly and inefficient.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, on top of all of that, the fines for missing actual money laundering activities, they are huge.
Oh, yeah.
Just as an example, HSBC back in 2012 was fined $1.9 billion.
Right.
And then more recently, we saw Westpac right here in Australia hit with a record $1.3 billion fine in 2020.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
These fines really make it clear that we need a much more robust and effective approach.
Yeah.
And that's where this whole idea of deep learning comes in.
Right. So how exactly does deep learning offer a potential solution to this very complex problem?
Well, deep learning, it's this powerful form of AI.
Okay.
And it uses these things called neural networks.
Right.
And these networks are inspired by, believe it or not, the structure of the human brain.
Yeah.
And they analyze these huge amounts of data, trying to identify patterns.
Okay.
And what deep learning is really good at is spotting subtle anomalies and connections that would be almost impossible for us humans to detect.
So can you give us some specific examples of the types of deep learning models that are being explored right now for anti-money laundering?
Yeah, absolutely. So one really promising model is the scalable graph convolutional neural network.
Wow.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But what makes this one so effective is its ability to analyze relationships between accounts and transactions.
Okay.
So imagine, instead of just seeing these individual transactions, you're seeing this whole web of connections.
Okay.
And that reveals how money is actually moving through all these different accounts.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So you can help uncover suspicious networks that might be involved in money laundering.
So it can spot those patterns of transactions across maybe many accounts.
Right.
Even if each individual transaction looks completely innocent on its own.
Exactly. That's the point.
Wow, that's really cool.
Another interesting model is what's called a multi-channel convolutional neural network.
Okay.
And this one's interesting because it incorporates information beyond just, financial data.
Oh.
So it looks at news articles, social media posts, other open source data.
Wow.
It's trying to build this more comprehensive picture of potential criminal activity.
It almost sounds like it's creating a profile of suspicious behavior.
Yeah.
By connecting the financial dots with activities in the real world.
Right.
That's amazing.
It's like having an AI detective that can piece together clues from all these different sources.
That's so cool.
And then you've got something called the autoencoder. And this one is excellent at detecting those very subtle anomalies that might indicate fraudulent activity. It's like having this highly sensitive alarm system that goes off at the slightest hint of, something that's out of place.
Oh, that's interesting. So all these sound really promising, but I imagine there are some challenges in building and training these AI models for such a complex task.
Oh, absolutely.
Like?
One of the biggest hurdles is simply data access.
Oh.
Banks, understandably, are really hesitant to share sensitive customer data because of privacy concerns.
Yeah.
So it makes it very hard to actually get that real-world data you need to train these models effectively.
Yeah, it's like a catch-22.
Yeah.
You need data to train the AI to detect money laundering, but getting that data is so difficult.
Exactly. And even if you could access the data, you'd need someone to go through and label it.
Right.
To actually say which transactions are suspicious and which ones aren't.
That's a huge task. Plus, I mean, just given like the volume and the speed of financial transactions,
Yeah.
the computational demands have got to be just immense.
Right.
We're talking about analyzing like, millions, if not billions of transactions every single day.
Yeah. And then there's this other major challenge.
Okay.
That we haven't really talked about yet.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's the explainability problem.
Right.
These deep learning models, they're really powerful, but they can also be very opaque.
Oh, yeah.
Like black boxes.
Right.
We don't always understand how they reach their conclusions.
Oh, right. Yeah. We touched upon that very briefly at the start.
Right.
This is where this whole explainable AI comes in.
Exactly, yeah. And in the world of anti-money laundering, this lack of transparency, it's a huge problem.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Banks can't just flag a transaction and say, well, our AI thinks it's suspicious.
Right.
They need to be able to provide, concrete reasons why.
Of course.
Both for their internal reviews and also to satisfy regulators.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like if a doctor diagnosed you based on some like mysterious AI prediction.
Right.
Without explaining the reasoning behind it, you definitely want to understand how they got there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to tackle this problem, there's this whole growing field of research called explainable AI, or XAI for short.
Right, XAI. Okay.
And the goal of XAI is to make the decision-making processes of these AI systems transparent and understandable to us humans.
So instead of just like spitting out a result,
Yeah.
the XAI would enable the AI to say something like, I flagged this transaction because it exhibits these specific patterns that are consistent with, known money laundering techniques.
Exactly.
Would instill a lot more confidence, for sure.
Right. It's about bridging that gap between these complex AI algorithms and human understanding.
Yeah.
And the exciting thing is that there are already a lot of promising XAI techniques out there that could be adapted for anti-money laundering.
Oh, that's cool. So given all these challenges and opportunities, what does the future hold for the fight against money laundering?
Well, the research highlights a few key areas for progress.
Fair.
Firstly, we need more research on graph mining and social network analysis.
Okay, so going beyond just identifying those suspicious transactions to actually understanding those underlying networks and how they operate.
Exactly, because remember those scalable graph convolutional neural networks we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
They have enormous potential to actually map and analyze these intricate relationships in financial networks that are often exploited for money laundering.
So if we can map these networks, then we can start to predict and disrupt their activity.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And another crucial area is the shift towards unsupervised learning methods.
Oh, okay. Remind me, what's unsupervised learning all about?
So unsupervised learning, it's a type of machine learning where the AI learns from data that hasn't been explicitly labeled. And this is particularly relevant for anti-money laundering because, as we discussed, labeled data is so scarce.
Right, yeah.
So instead of needing humans to go through and point out examples of money laundering, the AI could potentially identify patterns and anomalies on its own.
So it could just sift through, like, mountains of data.
Right.
Learn the normal patterns of financial behavior.
Exactly.
And then flag anything that deviates significantly from those patterns.
Yeah, it's like having an AI detective that develops its own understanding of what constitutes suspicious activity.
Wow, that is a game changer. So we've got advanced network analysis, unsupervised learning, and of course the crucial development of explainable AI.
Yeah.
It feels like we're on the cusp of a revolution in anti-money laundering.
There is definitely a lot of potential there.
Yeah.
However, it's also important to acknowledge that all of these advancements, they also raise some pretty fundamental questions.
Okay, like what kind of questions?
Well, for instance, can we achieve both high accuracy and de-explainability in these AI systems? Or are we going to have to make trade-offs?
Okay.
Will we prioritize accuracy even if it means sacrificing some transparency?
Okay.
Or vice versa?
Those are really tough questions.
Yeah.
It's almost like this, philosophical debate about the role of AI in critical decision-making.
Right.
Do we trust the black box if it's consistently right?
Yeah.
Or do we demand transparency even if it means potentially compromising accuracy?
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Of course.
The future of AI and anti-money laundering will likely involve navigating these tensions and striking that balance between those competing priorities.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful.
Oh, good.
You've given me a whole new perspective on this issue.
I'm glad to hear that.
So as we wrap up, what's your key takeaway for our listeners as they contemplate this evolving landscape of AI and financial crime?
I think the most important thing to remember is that AI is a tool.
Okay.
And like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. It's not a replacement for human judgment or critical thinking or ethical considerations.
Sure.
In fact, those human elements become even more crucial as we integrate AI into these increasingly complex systems.
So it's not about AI versus humans,
Right.
but rather about finding ways for AI and humans to work together effectively.
Precisely. AI can augment human capabilities.
Yeah.
It can help us analyze these vast amounts of data and identify patterns that would otherwise be invisible to us.
Right.
But ultimately, it's up to us humans to ensure that these technologies are used responsibly and ethically.
What a fascinating discussion.
Yeah, it's a really interesting area.
I've learned so much about the potential and the complexities of using deep learning to combat money laundering. But before we finish, any final thoughts for our listeners to ponder as they continue to explore this topic?
I would just encourage everyone to stay curious and engage in these conversations.
For sure.
Because the future of AI is being shaped right now. And it's vital that we approach it with a critical eye and a commitment to harnessing its power for good.
I love that. Imagine a world where AI doesn't just detect financial crime, but it also helps us understand it, predict it, and prevent it.
Right.
A world where we can combine cutting-edge technology with human ingenuity and ethical principles to create a more secure and transparent financial system.
Indeed. And while there are many challenges ahead, the potential rewards are immense.
Well, on that note of optimism,
Yeah.
we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey.
It's been my pleasure.
And until next time, keep exploring and stay curious. It feels like we've only just scratched the surface here.
Yeah, I know, right?
But what a fascinating exploration it's been.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm already kind of thinking about like the potential applications of explainable AI
Yeah.
beyond just anti-money laundering.
Oh, for sure.
It seems like any area where AI is making like critical decisions
Right.
would benefit from, greater transparency, like healthcare, criminal justice,
Self-driving cars.
self-driving cars. Yeah.
I mean, that ability to understand and trust AI's decision-making processes,
Right.
that's going to be essential as these technologies become, even more integrated into our lives.
Yeah. It's both exciting and a bit daunting to think about all the possibilities,
Yeah.
the challenges.
I think that's kind of the nature of progress, right?
Yeah.
New technologies, they always bring these new complexities.
Right.
And it's our responsibility to approach them, with a balanced perspective, acknowledging both the potential benefits and the potential risks.
Well said. Well said. So, dear listener, as you continue on your own deep dive into this world of deep learning and explainable AI, just remember, this is a journey of discovery, and there's still so many
Unanswered questions.
unanswered questions.
Uncharted territories.
Yeah, that's exciting.
It is.
But, with curiosity and critical thinking
Right.
and a commitment to ethical considerations,
Absolutely.
we can navigate this landscape. And
really harness the power of these technologies for good.
what a thought-provoking way to wrap up this episode.
It's been fun.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive
My pleasure.
into the world of deep learning and its potential to revolutionize anti-money laundering efforts. We hope you've gained some valuable insights
Yes.
and a renewed sense of wonder about all the possibilities of AI.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those tough questions.
Absolutely. Great advice.
And that brings us to the ends of another deep dive.
Sad to see it end.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time, keep diving deeper.